Thursday night hump. So glad to be here, fellas. Let me take a moment to make a few adjustments here, if you don't mind. Hey, Scott, how you doing? Hey, Maddie. Hey, fellas, how you doing? Good to have you guys here. Good to see you. All right, that's what I thought. All right, looks like we're good. How is everybody doing? I always start out by saying thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time here on the Upstairs to the Right music channel on YouTube with me. Time is a valuable and precious thing, I know. And so spending a little bit of yours with me will always be greatly appreciated. So thank you so much for that. Mr. Watson in the house, how you doing? Good to have you here. Well, you know, again, it's all relative, but the amount of snow that we had here for the last 3 days has been the most that we have had in quite a while here. As a matter of fact, in the 5 years that I can't believe it's been 5 years since I moved here from Singapore, but in the 5 years that I've lived here, this is the first real snow that I've seen. Inland sometimes you would get a little bit, but never reached Amsterdam. But man, it is like crazy snow, like full on, pretty deep, good powdery snow out there. And yeah, Maddie, I'll ship you some. Or you miss it, I'll ship you some of ours. We got plenty of it. And but my dogs like it. My dogs love it. My one dog is a Shiba Inu, and when I lived in Japan, the place that I lived at, it snowed. So she grew up with the snow, and of course, she lost that when she went to Singapore. But she got it in space today, and my youngest dog, my newest dog, it's her first real snow, and she just doesn't seem to mind it at all. So for them, it was good, beautiful thing. But it's getting kind of sticky out there. But it's winter. As they say, "Fuyu dakara" in Japanese. It's only winter. So I'm happy with it. I have to say, can't complain because again, like I said, I miss it. You know, it's so much snow that people are going down the streets in sleds. I'm not kidding. Uh, and people are skiing and like going down hills, or whatever they can find that will take them down the hill. It's pretty fun. Okay, I think that we've talked enough to get enough people here into the live stream. Um, I'm going to continue with my discussion that I started in the last live stream. I was talking about um, as a songwriter, you have to be primarily always, or you really should be asking yourself primarily always, what am I actually saying? And I went into that in great detail in the last live stream. If you hadn't checked that out, go back to the last one and take a look. Really got into it, the meat of this. But I want to expand upon that a little bit, because I think that we've lost something else with this streaming world. And it is beyond question. It's something that I've kind of touched upon. I want to get into a little bit more deeper tonight about the loss of albums when it comes to this streaming world. Again, uh, I say again so much. I re-listen to my podcast just to check it out to make sure everything is solid. And I always say, well, again, I got to stop saying that. I'm going to work on that. But as I was saying before, uh, with me growing up, albums were a real big part of my childhood. There are some albums out there that I can't imagine being as solid and as well structured as you could imagine, um, and then being parceled out as singles. And like for example, the White Album. Instead, somebody the Beatles put that out as, singles instead of, a whole cohesive album. You know, Even if you skip the tracks, somehow the album still seemed to remain cohesive. There was intent. I talked about intent in the last live stream as well. That goes part and parcel again with, what am I trying to say? And the art of sequencing. I'm really terrible at sequencing. I'll, I always put what I think is my best track first, not necessarily the title track, but I'll put what I think is my best track first, one that I like. And it inevitably ends up being another track that people seem to like more. So sequencing is an art, that even I, after many albums, have not really mastered. Although again, sequencing comes into play when you're trying to sell, not sell, when you're trying to tell a story uh, above and beyond just the music that's there in the collection. Um, and there is a art to that. The pacing of an album as well. Started out, just bring it up to the top, then kind of mellow out a little bit, bring it down, and then jolt it up again. And, you can end usually, bring it down and mellow to end it out. That pacing, which is part of sequencing as well, is something that's lost when you're just dealing with singles. You're just dealing with singles. Scott says, I love albums that I must listen to the whole thing. They're the best part of music. Yeah, as a cohesive piece of art. Music Companion made it. Welcome, sir. Glad you did. Benny's here. Hello, doing well. Scott says, you can't really have concept theme and themes in one song, but an album can be more than its components. Yes. You know, it inevitably, any band or even solo artist worth their salt, when they were putting together an album, they had that in mind, or they had a producer who knew that. And we have just lost that. That has just flown out the window. You know, m- Music now is almost, encountered accidentally. You don't really go looking for it, kind of finds you. And when it's done, it disappears. I'll give you a good example of that. When I was thinking about this, uh, I was in Singapore, and down the street from my house in Singapore, there was like a outdoor shopping arcade, and in that arcade was a Malay food restaurant that I actually like to go down and have lunch sometimes because I like Malay food. I discovered. And while sitting there, I heard the song, um, uh, "It's All About the Boom Boom." You guys know that song? It's all about the boom boom. And I I thought when I was sitting there listening to that, hearing that for the first time, I thought to myself, "Oh, that's catchy." It's got kind of a 50s, aesthetic to it. The lyrics are tongue in cheek, and it's got a nice, kind of groove to it. And I never thought about that song really again. Never thought about it again. Never really had any desire to reach out and, hey, let me listen to that. It's all about the boom boom song, It never came to my mind. It it's amazing to me. But that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Music that you don't go looking for, it finds you, and when it's done, it disappears. And again, this isn't old good, new bad kind of discussion. It's just different. It's just different. But something really important gets lost and when music is broken into little pieces. And I want to talk about that tonight. Let's see. Music Companion says, I have a rule about buying CDs when it came to over 30 plus years of buying albums. If it's a CD, it has to be an 8 out of 10. Um, I can dig that. I never had a problem growing up with 45s albums and then moving on to CDs. As a medium, I always considered a CD to be, you know, no different than an album. I don't really differentiate that. What I do have my concern about CDs is when they edited stuff out when it wasn't the full album. Gosh, who was that? That I had the album of it and then I got the CD of it, and there was like a bonus track or tracks missing. But anyway, I can dig that. Um, any more than two bad tracks, it's not a keeper. It's exceptions you made. Well, that's true of an album. If you talk, it has to be. I see. If it's got 10 tracks, you only allow two of them. Well, that's true of just about anything. I won't buy an album if it doesn't, have, I'm not going to buy an album because there's one song on it that I like. Although there have been times that I have back when I was younger and then found some other stuff that I liked. But I can dig that as well. Isn't the hit song supposed to be track 2 or 3 on an album? I think that's generally the pocket rule. No. Well, for example, in R&B, it's usually the first track. Michael Jackson's Bad was the first track. Prince's 1999 was the first track on the album. In R&B, it's generally that way. In rock, it can be a floater. It can be 2 or 3, the title track. Um, we have hundreds of albums and still buy them. We love searching through old albums. Oh, that's nice, Michael. Yeah. Um, Matty Two Head says we lost the album with the iPod. Really? Well, yeah, the iPod, which I still have mine lurking around here somewhere. The iPod, which reminds me, let me make another adjustment to my. Yeah, let's do that instead. I like that better. That always frames better. Um, the iPod was the beginning of streaming. It was really the MP3s that then led to streaming. And yeah, I agree with that. When we made that turn, even with CDs, it was still the whole album. Um, LP vinyl now is a take or leave it proposition. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough with and the cost also. You better be damn sure that you got some good stuff on there and you got an audience because the cost of printing vinyl is pretty expensive. I mean, if you just want to do a small run, it can cost you about, you know, 3,000 euros. Um, Motion picture soundtracks are also great together than apart. Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, I couldn't imagine that. I'm going to sound like a super, super duper nerd to you guys, which you probably have already figured out I am and was. But in 1979, when Star Trek the motion picture came out, I loved the movie because of the special effects. And the story was but I love the soundtrack. Jerry Goldsmith's soundtrack for that movie, and I bought the album soundtrack to that, and I used to listen to that thing all the way through. And no, you couldn't. And then you could imagine. I used to think of the movie for each part of the movie and what was that syncing with in terms of the film. And yeah, I can really say that that I know where that comes from. First track on the second side always has to rock. Yes, when you had an album, just even in the sequencing, not necessarily when you had an album in the sequencing, you have this climb up, kind of mellows out, give you a slow tune, and then you hit it with another mid tempo, and then or a mid tempo or something really heavy, and that usually is that middle part where again sequencing is a lost art form. I have dumb collection of movie soundtracks, so many bangers. Lash Action Hero, it's a great one. I know that one. The Crow, Mortal Kombat, Spawn movie, Judgment. Yeah, yeah. I love movie soundtracks. I One of the things that I've learned about scoring came from listening to stuff like that. I think as well. Last Action Hero soundtrack is awesome. Yeah, so many exclusives. Soundtracks used to rock. I had Rain's World. Yeah, the ones that those are the great ones. I had Wayne's World. I think everybody had the Wayne's World soundtrack album because it was it was something else. Yeah, you know, and the album format or the CD format later really paired well with this type of creativity that was coming out of the studios at that time, regardless of the genre. And again, we got I said again. So we were talking about sequencing. We were talking about intent, and all of these things again are lost when you start getting into just individual tracks. Um, Something gets lost when it's broken into interchangeable parts and pieces. You know, albums force a musician. If you have any takeaway from tonight, let this be it. That albums force a musician uh, to ask that difficult question: What am I trying to say? And it's not trying to say in what am I trying to say with this song? It's what am I trying to say overall? Because an album generally is thematic. Joni Mitchell's albums, thematic songs, sequenced, in a certain way. You listen to her albums, and I was listening to Blue Hotel Room the other night, and oh my goodness, that song just gets me every time. Such beauty. But that art form, that art, that she knew what she wanted to say, not in just the individual. The whole of the album was saying something like, you know, so many of her albums. And that kind of question does not exist in a singles culture. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. One of my and of a long number of pet peeves against hip hop uh, recently, within the last 5 to 10 years, is this mixtape concept. In other words, it's not a full album. It's what we used to call EPs. 5 or 6 songs, not a full album. Or and a lot of these mixtapes usually would be made up of the individual singles that they had put up to that point. And and none of it has any cohesiveness to it. It's just, one thing to the other to the other. There's no general statement. And if there's no central core statement being made, then you're not, you can't. What I'm saying is that you can, of course, make those central core statements in an individual song, but that individual song is even that much more powerful of a statement when it has a supporting uh, artwork, framework of an album around it that's supporting that theme, you know. And you're just not going to get that same oomph for that reason out of singles. It's just not going to happen. Where are we? Fast Times at Ridgemont High was a fair one. Yeah. you know, on the Fast Time at Ridgemont soundtrack, Jackson Brown song, "She's Gonna Be Somebody's Baby Tonight" is my favorite on that one. I bought that. That would be a good example of a soundtrack, an album that I bought just because I liked one song. But there were so many other great ones on there. But that song to this day is, I don't know what it is about that song, but it's just like it's like one or two of Springsteen's albums. It just has something to it, a sound to it. Silverchair albums always were sequenced really well. Maddie says. They would take you on a journey. Also, Soundgarden, yeah, because those guys knew, and they had producers who knew, because they had grown up in that, and that again, just like how to edit tape. Once we went digital, we lost that art form because cats aren't doing it anymore. Whereas before, that was one of the things that you had to learn how to do, cut and splice tape. You had to learn how to do that. It was, and yes, Neon Ballroom, for example. Yep. Street Fighter with Van Damme. Yep. 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 Any Elvis movie. Who was that? Oh, baby, you're so square, baby. I don't care. That was the soundtrack from that Blue Hawaii movie. I think. You know, that's the Elvis song that I like. I don't know why. It's the arrangement of it. I'm a producer, so I'm into arrangements. Um, yeah, algorithms really don't care about cohesion, and yet it's the algorithms that encourage this singles driven culture that we find ourselves in these days. Algorithms only care about engagement, and once it's got that that it's you know once it achieves that, it doesn't care about if it's a complete idea or not. It doesn't ask that question. Um, it's really only interested in how long somebody's eyeballs, or in this case, ears, were on that, or in YouTube's case, both. And this is the insidiousness of algorithms that I've touched upon. Well, one of the tentacles of insidiousness that algorithms have created this system. This has subtly changed how music is created. Shorter intros, um, you know, even so, I don't think it sees it as music per se as it sees it as shapes. So if the shape of your music is similar to all the other shapes that the algorithm deems fit, then it'll make it through. But if it doesn't, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole as far as the algorithm is concerned. And that's not a good thing. That's really not. And if you get caught into that, it causes a type of laziness, I think, with artists as well. you know, because before that challenge to come up with that great body of work has now been reduced to, singles and a mixtape. And it's just not the same thing, It really isn't. So Scott says, Mike, what's your thoughts on Rocky Horror Picture Show? I never understood it. Well, it was, what got it big was in LA on Santa Monica Boulevard. There's a movie theater called the Lamel Old Theater from the 40s, maybe. Uh, no, not maybe, for sure. And back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they started showing it as a midnight show. And they started encouraging people to come down there and dress up. And just because it was something to do, even my brother, he would know more about this because he went to it. I believe he and his friend Danny Zumwinkel went. It was a thing to do, and it never really was about the movie in itself. The movie in itself is, it is what it is. It was about the gathering. So without the gathering, the movie kind of falls apart. That's my thoughts on it. Rocky Horror is like an avant-garde, open sexuality Broadway musical. Yeah, definitely a product of the time. Yeah, you had Hair, you had gosh, the Naked Ape. You had a lot of stuff like that, during that time. I know it very well, very well. Maddie says, I'm pretty sure most indie singles are bought plays just like the sale and return of CDs back in the day. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Uh, Drake is facing federal RICO charges. The rapper Drake, I understand from my reading, is facing federal RICO charges because he was using online casinos to bump up views on his songs. I believe the casinos. My understanding is that these online sites were using these songs whenever somebody, click to their site or use one of their games or something, and it attributed to a scan listen, as far as the algorithm was concerned, and went to his sales, I guess, or views, I guess, and not views, but you guys know what I mean. Streams. Sorry, I can't think of the word. Streams. And money laundering and a few other things that were occurring as a result of that. And so it calls into question, if found guilty, then all of his streams will be called into question, and not just him. I think that anybody involved over a title is also, involved in that as well, in my opinion, or something to the equivalent. Drake is another Diddy, apparently dark stuff. Well, I don't know about his, proclivities as far as, baby oil is concerned, but as far as his business is concerned, these charges are pretty serious. Rico is, when they throw that out at you, it's a broad net, but it allows them to go on a fishing expedition on your ass, and that is something that you do not want. Happy New Year, Mike. Hey, Cat's Music Journey. Happy New Year to you too, sir. Good to have you here. Good to have you here. You know, Music Shape for Algorithm is optimized for monetary and momentary attention. It's not long tail. It's not set up for longevity. It's built to perform, not to endure, in other words. And I guess that's fine, but, you know, if you care about making I would hope that you took the effort, put it in. You don't consider it truly be your artwork, especially if you're the artist, to be that disposable that you don't care that you didn't create something or had a thought to create something that was lasting. So, and again, one of the unfortunate side effects of that is that your music is completely forgettable because it had no center. Another thing from the last live stream that I talked about is that center. Here's another great example of what that center or lack of that center means in real terms when you're a producer, when you're a songwriter. It would be better to write an entire album. If you got to go the singles route and you're young and that's it is because it is and that's the way it is, fine. Do a whole album and then release each one of those tracks out in the order that you would do with the album. That way, at least, there's a cohesive theme going through and then record, but you can't even do that because there's a certain amount of laziness too. But the algorithm trains you to be lazy. The old system and the old gatekeepers, physical gatekeepers, they did not. They laziness was not something that they encouraged. I mean, put it because they wanted to use you as much as they could. An album is really a stubborn format, though. I'm gonna be willing to admit to you. I I've asked people to watch, a 15-minute or a 10 or 15-minute video, and they said, I don't have time to watch something that long. Or listen to this. Oh, I don't have I don't want to listen to that's too long. I don't want to listen to that whole album. It takes patience and it asks the listeners for their time. I always start out this live stream talking about the value of time. And here's a good example of that. You know, it asks sometimes for set and setting. You know, get a girl in the right room with the right Sam Cooke album, and you might have something going on. Set and setting. Or there's a scene from Netflix drama series, The Queen, where the Princess Margaret is in her bedroom and she puts on I Only Have Eyes for You by was that the Shy Lights who came out with that? No, no. Anyway, I Only Have Eyes for You. And it is a magical scene because of the set and setting. You know, all these things make it unfashionable these days because, who has the time to lounge around, in their boudoir smoking cigarettes, listening to, the Shy Lights album. And it's something that, of course, some of us here on the Upstairs to the Right music channel, we will listen to our, we still have time for that. But the younger generation, really, because of this algorithm, again, some things that it shapes society, shapes culture, shapes thinking, you know, and this cultural shift that it's created, I just, I really wonder, I really wonder. An album doesn't chase you. Like, hey, listen to me. I'm shaking my ass again this week. Don't you want to hear about about it? An album doesn't chase, man. An album, it waits. It waits. You know. It doesn't perform well in feeds, but it performs well in memory. Like so many great albums, albums, you know, where a really good album will reference another song or another track on that same album, you know. And like for example, in Stairway to Heaven, and if you listen to Jimmy Page's playing in the first section, he references Over the Hills and Far Away musically in that. And that's a musical reference. So many things that you can do in an album format that if you're the listener and the musician is asking you to pay attention to those things, to find those little nuggets that they'll put in there in that album format, either lyrically or musically, that are there to say, hey, are you really listening? Are you paying attention? And folks just don't have the patience to pay attention like that anymore. But the album, it seeks you to have time. And when you as an artist, getting back to songwriting production, when you as an artist commit to an album, you're saying, I believe this body of work deserves to exist cohesively together. You don't view it as a bunch of singles, you view it as a body of work, a body of work. And this is, you know, a lost art. Sure, Taylor Swift puts out albums. She doesn't put out singles, puts out, per se. Like, she doesn't do mixtapes. She puts out albums, and they all have a cohesive theme to them. And I believe, and Beyonce on the R&B side will do the same. She'll put out an album that has a theme to it. Yet, the minor artists are not allowed to have a whole album to make a cohesive statement. They're sort of forced, it seems to me, by the record companies to just release singles and to have a single orientated mindset. You have to rise to the level of a Beyonce or a Taylor Swift or a Drake, speaking of Drake, or, you can fill in the blank there, any modern act you choose, in order to have the chance to even make that kind of statement to an audience. It seems to me. You know, I think because, you know, actually, I won't even speculate on that, but you guys could chew on that one. But just a thought. You know, I have decided, as you guys know, uh, to look into putting out my CD of all of my work, CDs of all my work. And I'm happy to say that I have gone ahead and made it so that I am designing the packaging um, for Ants in the Pantry for a physical CD. That's one of the things that I was working on today. And over on my Bandcamp page, um, you can see where it's available to order for sale. What I'll do is do a limited run on it and see how that goes. But I'm doing it because I want it to exist in a physical form. This intangibleness is really something that bothers me. And I want this collection and body of work that I've done to be tangible. So it is something that really means a lot to me uh, to be able to put this together. You guys can go over here to the Bandcamp page. I just put it up there, and you can see where that's available. I'll sign them. Each one will be signed by me, and you know, I really am pleased to be able to put out something tangible. It'll look very similar to this when I'm done with the artwork. And in any case, you know, it's just something that this stream of thought recently led me to. You know, physical media is not temporary by design, streaming is. And I've allowed myself, to fall into the streaming trap. And I don't want to really support that too much anymore. A CD doesn't care if I upload next week. A CD doesn't care if engagement trips or drops. It doesn't care if the trends shift in music. It just exists. So there's that. And yes, the album's been on Bandcamp digitally for a while. This is the same work. It's just made physical for people who value that. That's really what it is. Uh, let's see. Catch up here in the chat. I remember a Slash interview. He was asked why he turned Diddy turned down Diddy multiple times. He'd rather not comment, but thinks he has flying or borrowed wings. This is like pre-velvet. Yeah, yeah. I think I know what you're talking about with that one. Life cycle of single on a chart are 1 week, yeah, really, seriously. At least in the CD era, they would go for 3 months. I agree. Moxie Fuvis aren't great, but any means their albums Bargainville is so fun to hear, in my opinion. If only heard the pop song, I would never think about it twice. Check that out. Anyone remember when Warner Brothers got busted for paying major radio stations to play Madonna on top of every hour? Well, Pale has been going on for years. It still goes on for $50,000. No, what's it going right? Yeah, $50,000. $50,000, you can get placed, in the I think it's the top 40. Yeah, I'll click on that, Scott. Thank you for that link. Slayer's South of Heaven is consistently calling me to play it. Nice. Scott Bob, I got kicked out of guitar class in third grade because I played Slayer on my guitar case. Really? That gets you kicked out? That's what they get for forcing me to play Yellow Submarine. Oh, that's hilarious, Scott. Um, I got a mail from Bandcamp today about that. Digging around to it, just saw the notification. Looking forward to it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. If you do support that, my music teacher was insane. Second year was mostly square dancing music. Yeah, my music teacher in seventh grade, Mr. Patowski, he played in the Sound of Music orchestra for the original recording, like in the 50s. Mind you guys, this is 1978, 77, 78. And he made us play the Music Man all the way through. Oh gosh, I hated that. Not a guitar drum kit in sight. Then they're yeah, yeah. this shift, you know, we lose everything in a single format. We lose narrative, we lose contrast, we lose patience because we're not going to listen to a whole album, and we lose restraint too. I talked about that in the last live stream. I think that that is one of the great ills of rap music is, the loss of restraint. And we lost how an album revealed itself as you went through it. Listen to Led Zeppelin 3 if you want a good example, or Houses of the Holy, even better, to understand that unfolding of an album as it goes through, as it goes along. Again, so many examples. I could we all throw out examples of albums, and we know what this is, but yet still, it's something that's been lost. That unfolding, sitting with something that doesn't need to immediately scream in its face, in your face, what it is. It's like, it's like, going out with somebody on a date. You slowly review, you talk to them, you learn a little bit more, and it reveals itself. And then maybe, as it goes through, it can be hit or miss or something magical, you know. But that's how albums work, you know. Albums also allow for quiet tracks that dip, that change the mood, which is so important in when you're sequencing. And odd transitions between tracks, uh, a skidding car. At the end of one song, you get the skidding car, and then it bleeds into another track. Some effect, something in order to give you those kind of weird transitions from one track to the other. The Beatles were famous for that. Fade ins, fade outs, interludes, things of that nature. And these moments make sense in the cohesiveness of the album. But you know, in this optimization is what I call it. That's my term for it. I talked about that again in the last live stream. In this optimization culture, um, doesn't really allow for that kind of subtlety. It just doesn't, you know. But these kind of subtleties, if you experience them, if you grew up in an album culture, these kind of subtleties you remember years later. It's one of the reasons why you play those old albums again because of those. And you it was mentioned here in the live stream that top 40 song hit song only last a week. The algorithm is driving that. You're allowing an algorithm to dictate culture. This is completely Orwellian at this point. I shine a light on this in so many ways. I don't know what else, how many other ways I can to show you how diabolical it is. How diabolical it is. I think we lost the ability to choose what we like. Also, Maddie says, and get invested in something. If it doesn't exist physically, it's like there's no root. That's what I was. So that's what I was alluding to in the beginning, is that these songs these days are drive-by. I was sitting in a Malay restaurant having lunch, and I heard, it's all about the bass or boom boom or whatever that. All about the bass, I think was the name of that song. And uh, sat there, well, okay, that's interesting. That's catchy. I like that. Never thought about it again. Never thought about it again. Drive by. No investment because it didn't exist in a physical CD format. It was just a stream, and it wasn't something that I was looking for. There's no real connection as a result. Correct. I think Pink Floyd were masters of, yes. Pink Floyd, again, super duper masters of that. Can't really argue with that. Wish You Were Here is basically one long song. The Wall is a the Wall is absolutely that. That would be a mega example of what I'm talking about. Dream Theater's Octavium has to be appreciated in its whole. Each of the eight tracks are different timings. Track one is 1/8 time, two is in 2/8 time, three is in 3/8 time, and so on. Yep, I agree. I remember when Sting 10 when Sting Summers Tale 10 Summers Tales dropped, I was alternating that and Megadeth. Rest in peace, back to back for a while. Some are both album bangers. Yeah, man, I can dig that musical companion. But you could do that, you know. The Wall one song on two CDs low. Yeah. Well, that happened. You had some, Prince's Sign of the Times was a two CD set. I had it. Another thing lost in the midst of moving over across the world in time. Uh, it's interesting to me, you know, that we have allowed ourselves to get to this point. We've really lost something. The stuff that actually lasts. We've really lost some things here because you know if a piece of music can exist outside of streaming, outside of the feed, outside of the drive-by zone, and get into a place where people seek it, then you've achieved something. And I just don't see modern streaming songs as being that. Even the songs that people are listening to on streaming the most in their original formats were on albums. You know, S- Gen X, Gen Z are listening. Millennials are listening to stuff from the '90s and the '80s. That stuff existed on a different format. Therefore, its center is different than the modern stuff, with a few exceptions. Scott says, when every digital track needs cover art, the art cover is lost. Yeah, exactly. Well, again, I said again. Damn it. I gotta stop doing that. Should put $1 in the hat every time I say again. The cover work, the artwork is just as important as anything else. I thought about this. I This is my artwork design that I did for this single love letter. On the back, I actually created, if you can see, a bunch of albums, and there's mine. You know, where I've included the album information, the single number, and a lot of thought goes into an album. Well, this is a single, but the same thought I put into this, I put into my album covers as well. That the album cover was a reflection of what was inside as well. You know, and again, that's a lack of cohesiveness. That's a lack of intent. Again, the antithesis of all the things. It's the lack of what am I trying to say here. The antithesis is all the things that you really should, or we used to look at as a recording artist, as a producer, whatever. It's not telling anyone how to release music, by the way. There's no single correct approach anymore. There's not. You know. But I do think it's worth asking, are you making things to be consumed or are you making things to be kept? Because those are totally different goals and they lead to different choices. I myself chose the latter, you know. I think that I would like my music to be enjoyed and a long, not just consumed. And I put the effort in making cohesive albums uh, with that intent in mind. Music Companion, I can tell you the algorithm is garbage. Yeah. When I want to jam to thrash Megadeth, Napalm Death, Spotify says here's Calm in Linkin Park. It's the same thing, isn't it? So just now gets Taylor Swift. Yeah, dig it, man. Again, I think the key takeaway here really is what Maddie was hitting upon is that, you're being led by the nose as to what to listen to. The algorithm, again, is dictating what it considers to be worthy in its mind of you to be listening to, as opposed to the way things used to be. We made those choices. Yeah, there was payola going on, but there were still record shops where you went to the record shop and you flipped through a bunch of albums, and you saw the artwork to something. You said, "Hey, this catches my eye. I like this artwork. I wonder what the music sounds like." And sometimes in some of the music stores, you could put you could take the album out, play it, listen to it later when CDs came in. Tower Records in Tokyo, they had CD towers where you could preview the CD, you know, and listen to it before you bought it. And I don't know, we've lost a lot. We've lost a lot, but you had to been born in that kind of era, and I'm afraid those of us who have experienced the world of vinyl records being the way to consume music are quickly, aging out. This is a great episode, Mike. Thanks. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It is a good topic. It is a good topic because I honestly am saddened by the loss of those things. It makes you feel old fashioned, when you tell people, "Oh, I just put out an album." They're like, "An album?" Let me check my watch. What is this, 1956? You know, uh, that statement is actually in some places, setting yourself up for mockery because it was so discouraged. It was so discouraged. For some reason, people will respect you. Oh yeah, man, I'm coming out with a new single. As opposed to yeah, I have an album, because automatically people are like, oh, I'll listen to your single, but oh god, do I have to listen to a whole album again? Man, it's weird where this place and time we're in. Scott says the only time an album let me down was Baron Earth's album Curse of the Red River. But that title just in itself sounds like it was going down the wrong river. First track was beyond epic, then everything else was meh. Yeah, sometimes, like I said, that goes again to the artist and what am I trying to say here? And they had one thing to say, but maybe everything else supporting it wasn't as strong. Again, but they still had intent, I'm sure. Even Pia Zadora had intent when she came out with her album. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, but we've lost that center. we've lost a lot of things when we lost the album. When we lost physical media. When we lost physical media. So chew upon that, ponder upon that, folks. Being the Wednesday night show, I am going to retire because I'm probably going to have to dig myself out of my front door tomorrow morning, depending upon if it snows again overnight. Something to ponder upon, guys. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and to ponder along with me and to give me something to think about as well. Quite a few really interesting points made by you guys tonight. And I want to thank you so much for doing it. Um, I get the winter blues, I suppose, but sitting down and writing these scripts and expanding upon these ideas and pointing out, this world the way that I see it, is a lot of fun. And thank you guys so much for taking the time to tune in and share that fun with me. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Maddie, for moderating. Thank you for the rest of you guys for always showing up, sticking in there with me, supporting me, and showing me love. Um, if you haven't, go over to Bandcamp, check out that CD. I'm working on it. And everything else is copacetic, guys. If everything else being equal, all things being equal, I should see you Sunday night. So you guys take care till then. Night.